Hey, what's up? It's Vladimir. Today I want to share with you my experience in studying courage. I spent a couple of days by wrapping my head around this concept, and I got through the point where first I thought that I know nothing about courage, and now it seems as if I were a kind of expert. So I may tell you about courage everything. And yeah, let's just talk about how I studied courage from the beginning. It was chosen as a topic of discussion for my speaking club. And this week, at the end of the week, we are going to talk about courage on Sunday. So if you'd like to participate, come in the Visual Cultural Center, 4 p.m. on Sunday. So on Sunday, last Sunday, I started from memorizing a poem by William Ernest Henley. He was an English writer, and he lived in the end of 19th century. So the poem is called Invictus. I first found this poem a couple of years ago, and well, it was kind of inspiring, but I never tried to memorize it, and at the beginning of this week until at the end of last week I've done it, and it was quite interesting. I'd like to read this poem right now. So Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and will find me unafraid. It matters not how stride the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. There's an amazing reading of this poem on YouTube, and it's actually more like a song. It's like not a poem, with animation where it's like there's the picture of this guy, William Ernest Henley, and he kind of talks to. No, it's like go on. You may just type it. Invictus by William Ernest Henley, and you'll find this on YouTube. Anyway, so it's like how I started working on this topic. Just memorize the poem, and then it was on the end of Sunday. Actually, I wrote down this poem on the end of Sunday, and then I started memorizing it at Monday when I had a short walk. And during this walk, I also tried to come up with questions. So first of all, it was questions like what is courage? What do I know about courage? How would I describe it? What can I learn from a discussion about courage? And all sorts of questions like that. And I didn't come up with many questions. There were probably like 5 or 6 of them. And I tried, like, the main idea was that I tried to focus my attention on this concept. So I constantly tried to think about courage, and it was very hard. I mean, it took me a couple of hours to find any definition. I didn't read anything before that, so I tried to come up with my own definition, and there were many definitions. One of them, which I liked the most, was kind of funny. It wasn't like actual definition, it was the symptom. Courage is the symptom of the addiction to adrenaline. And yeah, so definitions, questions, but all of this was kind of boring. I couldn't really think a lot about courage since I didn't have any content. I mean, I tried to think about my personal experience, about my life. There were many examples where I took courage to do something. And there are many opposite examples when I found myself being cowardly, and well, all this process, so it was almost the entire day, so I spent like maybe 8 hours trying to focus my attention on this concept, and I couldn't find anything meaningful. Then at the end of the day I started watching videos on YouTube, and I watched a couple of videos, one by Gregory Sadler. He's a professor of philosophy, and another video also by a professor of philosophy, Wes Cecil. The first one I didn't watch at the end, I mean till the end. It was very boring. I stopped watching after 10 minutes, but it was actually more beneficial than an hour-long lecture by Wes Cecil, because this Sadler was talking about Aristotle and the Aristotelian book Nicomachean Ethics, and in this book later I discovered many amazing ideas about courage, but it happened already the next day. So but this day, Monday, so I finished by watching a few videos, and then I fell asleep. The next morning I had brilliant, it was so clear. So on Monday it wasn't clear at all. I couldn't think a lot about courage, I couldn't develop any long train of thought. Whenever I tried to think verbally, so create some kind of dialogue or monologue, I always failed. So it was like, no, I couldn't keep on thinking for longer than just 1 minute. And then on Tuesday, I started like writing a script for a conversation. So it was the whole, like I tried to imagine how can we build a conversation on courage, and I got too far. It's like I wrote a paper which was, there were like eight pages. So it was a long paper. It took me maybe 4 hours to write it. And yeah, there was such an interesting, and first I started elaborating this concept by writing questions, looking for some idioms, looking up some definitions everywhere: Oxford Dictionary, Cambridge Dictionary, Urban Dictionary, Longman Dictionary, vocabulary.com. Learned about etymology of this word. Courage actually means heart, so it's a French, or it's a French, in French it means heart, and in Latin it also means like core. Courage is it's a heart. So what's that? I'm talking just 8 minutes. That's amazing. Time is just completely disappears. I don't feel any time. Anyway, so there was this task to write some thoughts, and then I started reading Aristotelian book, and it was actually the breakthrough, since all my thoughts, as I said, it was kind of, at Monday it was vague and I couldn't understand anything. I just was making questions and I couldn't even say what courage was. It was like clear that it's something that helps us to confront some dangerous situations, but on average it was kind of, I couldn't say much about it. But after, on Tuesday, after like listening to few hours of lectures and thinking and trying to put my thoughts together, so I discovered that on Tuesday my mind was more clear, and then after I read Aristotle, it was so brilliant. I mean, I can't even describe how it feels, as if you just pull some, well, imagine that you, like, this is a ball, and you just pull the rope and it was like pulling the rope. And when I started reading Aristotle, it's like it's letting go. And as soon as I read these ideas that courage, like fear, and actually these ideas were presented in Wikipedia, and it was stated that courage is a balance between fear and confidence, and Aristotle was thinking that, you know, it's one of the cardinal virtues, whatever. But when I was reading Wikipedia, I didn't have anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't perceive it, and it was so uncertain. But when I read Aristotle, just few lines, and my way of doing that was I opened this book, Economic and Ethics, PDF file, and I just typed this word, courage, and I wanted to read every sentence or paragraph where this word was mentioned. And I started reading, and I was, wow, that's so great. Like, first of all, I was curious about the idea of developing courage, and it wasn't quite clear. I couldn't figure out what actually we can do to become courageous. Well, it's obviously you may just, you know, you may try to confront your fear, but how? What exactly should you do? And then in Aristotle I read that, you know, just make like acts of courage makes us courageous. And this was like so mind-boggling. I mean, it was it was obvious, it was trivial, it was banal, but then something just switched in my mind. And wow, now I see it so clearly. So all I need to do to become courageous is just to do something which I think is courageous, which I usually don't do, or which I'm afraid to do. And I started thinking, like, what makes me afraid? What threatens me? And at first, again, I couldn't come up with anything meaningful. I was thinking, oh, I don't fear anything. I have no fear in doing anything because, well, you know, majority of people can just do this. Can talk to the camera, can do any kind of public speaking. Of course, I'm not talking about something crazy like, you know, going and fighting with a bunch of barbarians or barbarians, barbers, whatever. I'm talking about something rational. So it's like you may develop courage just by, you know, going to some competition, boxing competition, without actually training yourself in boxing. Just go subscribe to boxing competition and go over and fight, and probably you can do it. But it's not courage; it's foolhardy. The foolhardy is like when you don't have fear. So the whole thing with courage is that you have to have fear. It's not enough if you are not afraid of doing something. You can develop courage. For example, I'm not afraid to talk to the camera and you know, go in the street and do this walking and talking. But for many people, it's really scare, and especially when we are talking about English, you know, somebody walking and talking in English. It's in Russian probably it's not so scary, but in English, wow, man. I mean, when English is a second language, of course. So for me, I don't have fear doing that. But the first time when I did that, I actually was terrified. Like it was so hard. And I didn't want to do that, especially in the street. I could record myself walking and talking in the forest, but as soon as somebody looked at me, it was so threatening. I had this resistance, and after practicing for a couple of, I would say for a couple of weeks, I realized that there's nothing I can be afraid of. So I just started doing it everywhere. So I could go in the center and just walk and talk, even in spite of lots of people walking and looking at me. I didn't care. And now it's like I developed this ability. Now I need to do something else, something more threatening or dangerous, because now I can't improve my courage. I can develop courage just by talking to myself and walking, like using this exercise. But there are lots of things which I'm afraid of, and I realized, like, you know, there's some, well, I don't like to talk about my fears, of course, but the primitive thing is like talking to a group of strangers. There on the internet there are lots of apps where you can go and have a group chat, and that's exactly what I did yesterday, like trying to train my courage. So I got on this group chat and people were talking English, and for me I can easily talk one-to-one. I like to do that, and I had many conversations with people one-to-one on the internet. But to have a group chat, kind of, yeah, well, I had a group chat as well, but the point is, like, one thing when it's prepared and when you know what's going on, when you know the subject, when you understand what to do, and the other thing is just to get at the random chat and start talking. And I remember I tried to do that a few times, but I couldn't, like, I could join the chat, but I wouldn't say anything. I was just silent for, you know, a few minutes, and then I left the chat. Why? Because people were talking and it was kind of hard for me to interrupt them. And most of the time these discussions were meaningless, and like for me at least, for them they were laughing and talking, and I didn't find it like interesting. So, and I left almost all the time. And yesterday I did that. So I got on this bloody chat, talked to strangers, and there are lots of rooms. So there's like US chat, Britain chat, Indian chat, whatever. So, and there are usually a group of people, and I got on UK chat, United Kingdom chat. There were, I don't know how many people. It showed that there were like 10 people, and 3 or 4 of them were talking. And I was thinking, man, I have to take courage and just say something. And I was sitting, and it was so strange. First of all, it's completely anonymous, so you don't need to tell your name, whatever, but still there's some kind of resistance that doesn't allow you to speak, to say, to interrupt, to jump in. And I said to myself, okay, let's try. Like, I don't care, like, actually I'll try and see how it works. And then I started talking some crazy shit about, you know, I just interrupted in the middle of conversation and asked, like, would these people talk about Aristotelian book just in the chat? They were, what the hell is going on? I said, guys, let's, like, you know, I have to, you know, prepare this conversation on courage, and I read this book and it's amazing. Like, let me read you a few sentences. And there was silence, and people just stopped talking, and I started reading this, like, Nicomachean Ethics from the beginning. And for me, again, it was kind of mind-boggling. When I started reading, I realized immediately, like, since I was thinking for 10 hours before I started reading, I was thinking for 10 hours trying to figure out what was courage. And when I read the first line, it's like immediately, like, organized all. It's like there was chaos, huge chaos of ideas and concepts, but it wasn't clear. And as soon as I started reading an Aristotelian book, it immediately, like, got organized, as if it's like I got this experience of 10 hours just in 1 second. Yeah, but then I read this in the chat, and everybody just, you know, nobody said anything. And I was, wow, it's so awkward, it's so embarrassing. And then I started talking, like, okay guys, I see it's stupid, let's talk about something else. And I started again talking about courage and asking people some questions which I prepared for the conversation. And yeah, and it wasn't an interesting discussion, since people were very reluctant to talk. But anyway, I just managed, like, I got there on public chat, there were, like, people talking, not native speakers, some of them were from, you know, Asia, but they were talking in English. The girl probably was also from Asia. I don't remember exactly. The point was, there was few people who stayed after I started, like, you know, managing the conversation, taking over the conversation. So there are a few people left, and I managed to like talk to them for maybe 20 minutes, and it wasn't interesting as I said, but it still was like, wow, that's cool. So I can just, and then this new idea that I may just go on these chats and try to, you know, try to take over the conversation, the dialogue, the discourse, and instead of like listening to people, just trying to persuade them to talk about things which I actually want to understand better and which I want to talk about. Yeah, just one simple thing again. There are many other small things about courage which I started noticing, and after, like on Tuesday, it was the second day when I was really engaged in the process, when I paid attention, and when I was like, I repeated this word courage like maybe 100 times on Monday, and on Tuesday it probably was like maybe 500 times or even more. So I was thinking about it constantly. I tried to focus my full attention, undivided attention on this idea. And so after this day, I kind of exhausted myself. As I said, I wrote the whole article, like 8 pages, like a conversation, so trying to think how we might build a discussion on courage. So basically I was, okay, let's talk about courage. This is our topic for today. What would you guys say? And then I tried to answer some questions as if I were like all these people who come to the speaking club. So I put myself in their minds and tried to think what would they say. Well, basically, of course, I didn't try to think a lot what would they say. I tried to develop those ideas which I learned from the internet and just put some thoughts in their head. So basically, I didn't, like the first time when I did that, when I developed a conversation on teaching, it actually was like that. So I tried to really imagine what people would say about the subject. But this time I basically was interested in developing my ideas. So I didn't, like, I used people only like puppets. I actually didn't think, okay, what this person exactly will say. I thought, okay, this is what I want to say, and this is the person who can express this idea. So this is the person whom I can use to express this idea. Well, and as I said, it's like 8 pages. I added some fictional character. So basically I'm trying to use only real characters, like real people, their names, but this time I added a fictional character, like my not alter ego, it's like my nickname. And yeah, it was kind of fascinating. I also read the research on courage where people were asked, like, what do they find courageous, and basically there was like questions on behavior, so you have to answer like, what kind of behavior do you find courageous, not just, and it was abstract, not exactly what kind of act, but like, you know, to confront your fear, for example, or to handle a dangerous situation, or do whatever the hell they may do, sacrifice yourself for others. And in this research, the first day there was 200 students whom they asked, and then they tried to evaluate their responses by ranking them and asking like the same people to ask what kind of, you know, responses they find more persuasive and realistic, whatever. Yeah, and there was like 4 stages of this research, and I read almost all of it. Maybe half of it, okay, not all. The first part, because the second part, I don't think that it's actually a good idea to ask people, just usual people, average people, laymen, and you know, learn something about courage just by asking people, because people are basically biased. They, like, I guess if I ask like 100 people in the street what they think about courage, well, probably they will give me some answers, but it will have nothing to do with real courage. Because if I ask the same people like how much time have you dedicated to thinking about courage, probably the answer will be like none, because who thinks about courage? Like, I didn't think about it too. I have to admit that. So before we took it as a topic for a discussion, I actually never tried to think about it seriously. Since when I started thinking, I learned a lot immediately. Like in a few days I got from knowing nothing about it, like having some vague understanding. And by the way, this research which I mentioned, it had a kind of, it was called the Implicit Theory of Courage. And in this research the idea was not to learn what is courage. Like, well, it was the idea, but implicit theory means that everybody has an idea of courage, a vague idea, usually not articulated. And this idea determines people's perceptions. So when we interact with each other, like we unconsciously measure the level of each other courage, and it actually plays a huge role in interactions, in communications. So the implicit theory, like everybody has an implicit theory, but again, people are they are so confused, and if you don't think about it, it's like, well, I was thinking for many years about different philosophical and other ideas, and still I never thought about courage. Like seriously, I never tried to learn it. And then this time when we picked it up as a topic for a discussion, I was, wow, that's so great. Like I may dedicate a lot of time. Like I think I'll develop this topic further, and not just topic. It's like, wow, it's so great. I mean, courage. Just imagine how much you may learn, not just in terms of language, but in terms of like self-development, self-improvement. If you just pay attention to courage every single day, so if you meditate on courage for 5 minutes a day, like how far you can go in a month or in a year. And by the way, as I said, like the second day when I focused my attention on courage, like I was like, probably I used this word in my mental process, in my stream of consciousness for 500 times. And I started noticing everything related to courage. Like I was going, for example, in the street, and there was a crossroad, and I was thinking, wow, like actually, it's very courageous to get through the crossroad without looking aside. So there's a small chance that you may be hit by a car, but yeah, you are doing the right thing. So if you go like in a special place, you are doing the right thing, and yeah, it's like it's so controversial. But anyway, so there were some other things which I can't even remember right now, but I certainly remember I was like, oh, this is actually relates to courage. This is what I'd like to know. This is what I'd like to understand better. This is what I can use as an example to describe this concept. My personal experience, there was a question where, like, in which situations courage may be dangerous, or it may lead you to some troubles. And in my life, like, it's one of the earliest memory which I have about myself. I was 4 years old. It was a kindergarten, and we played a game. There was a ladder on the wall, and the rules were like you have to jump from the upper stair, and those who jump from the upper stair, they win. And after one or few attempts, I just climbed at the top of the ladder. I was 4 years old. Climbed at the top of the ladder. I don't know how tall it was, but probably it was like maybe 3 or 4 meters. I don't remember exactly. But the point was I climbed at the top and jumped and broke my leg. It was the first painful experience in my life, which I remembered pretty damn well. Yeah, and it was fascinating. And after that there was many other examples like that. Yeah, sure. Okay, what's time?